Ciao a tutti. That means hello everyone. Welcome to this Facebook session. I'm going to be teaching you some basic Italian today. We're going to focus on colours. And so, yeah, my name's Libby. I'm a BeFriend volunteer, and outside of BeFriend, I'm doing a master's degree in journalism at the University of Sheffield. So I'm based in Sheffield, but I'm originally from Doncaster. So what qualifies me to be teaching you any Italian? I did my bachelor's degree about 5 years ago now, and that was in German and Italian. And I also lived in Italy only for about 5 months. But when you're learning a new language, it's very easy to pick up when you're in that kind of environment, and it also teaches you just a lot more about how to put the culture almost into the language, and especially in Italian, you can see I'm already using my hands. It's a very, they use a lot of gestures, they use a lot of body language, and they also use a lot of emphasis to really convey the message that they want to give. So all of those things tie into the Italian language, and those are some things that I picked up while I was living there, which have really helped me develop my own Italian. So that's me. So in this lesson, I'm going to teach you the 7 colours of the, here's our first word of the session, arcobaleno, which means rainbow. The first portion of that, arco, literally means arch, very similar to the English. And the baleno means flash, or like a strike of light, like you would use it in the context of a flash of lightning. So it literally translates as arch flash, which kind of makes sense in English, but not entirely. It's not meant to be translated literally. So we're going to learn the 5 colours of the arcobaleno and get a feel for the Italian language and the sounds of Italian, and also learn a couple of phrases along the way, or not phrases, a bit of vocab along the way that's relevant to the words, the colours and things like that. If you want to grab a pen and paper to follow along, you can do so now. You might want to write down some of the spellings. If not, that's totally fine as well. You can just follow along. I'll be writing things down. I've got a whiteboard, so you'll see the spellings and you can just memorise them if you want. Or you can do none of that and you can just enjoy listening to the Italian that we'll go through. So, without further ado, we're going to start on our first colour, which is this one, rosa, and that means red. You can remember this word because it has the same start letter as red in English, and also because rosa, my apologies, it's rosso with an O at the end. But what I was going to say is that you can remember rosso because there's also a famous type of pizza that is rosa. You may have heard of it. It's known for having very little cheese on it. Hopefully you can see this, by the way. It's known for having very little cheese on it and is primarily just a bright tomatoey base. So that's a rosa, and the word for red is rosso. As you can hear when I say it, it's really important to roll the R at the start. It's the difference between sounding like you know Italian and not. It just adds an accent to it. It's similar to someone learning English, for example, and trying to say the word the, but that's very specific English sound, the, with the little vibration that you get at the back of your mouth. And a lot of other nationalities, when they try and speak English, struggle with that sound, and instead they'll say duh or th or something similar. And so if someone is to say the and English is not their first language, it just adds to the sense that they know the language, they're able to speak it fluently. And it's the same with the rolling of the R in Italian, and you'll find that in a lot of words, whether it's at the start or in the middle, or not if it's at the end. Generally, I can't think of any examples, but yeah, you will always roll the R. And just generally try and Italianize the way that you say this word. So I'm not saying it like Rosso, like you would in English. It has to be like rosso, make it sound authentic. Half the time you just have to fake it and you'll start to sound more Italian the more you like develop the Italian accent in the words that you say. So next is blu. And it's just exactly the same almost, except for one letter as the English word, which is blue. It's just a bit more, it's just a different vowel sound at the end really. Whereas we would say blue, they say blue. The U has a bit of a deeper sound at the end, blue, I suppose. You sort of elongate it a little bit, which we don't. This word is known in languages as a cognate, which means that it both looks and sounds very similar to the English word. And there's quite a lot of those in Italian just because of the roots of the English language. We've got so many Latin, French, Romantic language roots. Despite our main source, like our main language heritage, I suppose, being Germanic, we've got a big influence of like the Latin languages as well. So that's why words like that are so similar in English. The third colour is giallo, which means yellow. Similar a little bit in the ending, that it has the low sound at the end, but whereas in English we would say yellow and finish with our mouth more closed, it's left more open at the end. If you say it in Italian, giallo is how you would end it properly, not giallo as we would do in English. This first three sequence of letters is said relatively quickly. Despite pronouncing all three of the letters ja, it is said so quickly that it just sounds like ja, like that, but it is ja, giallo. And it is important that at the end of the word you really round the L, so it's like that. That's the best way to describe it. And then the O is like oh at the end, giallo. It's also, yes, so these three letters, this sequence of letters is very common in Italian. And I'll just give you some example words that are similar and have the sequence of letters. Già on its own just means already, like you've already done something. And then, just got to turn this very big board towards me so that I can read it. Then there's also giorno, which means day. And obviously giorno is G-I-O, but you can see how when it's a G followed by two vowels in this sort of thing, it's got that quick, snappy sound, ja, jo. And yeah, it's one of those sequences of letters that comes up quite frequently, and you just have to learn how to say it quickly and not put too much emphasis on it at the start of the word, because when I said giallo, you can probably hear that it's quick at the start and then elongated towards the end. Okay, so the next word is, I hope you can see this. The next word is, oh, I can see my reflection in the window. Yeah, there we go, you can see it. The next word is verde, and that means green. If you know any French, you might have come across this word as well. I'm fairly certain, my French isn't very good, but I'm fairly certain that verde is very similar in French. I think it may even be just verde or something like that. So yeah, in Italian, very similar. You just pronounce the E on the end, whereas in English it would be silent. Verde, and the R, obviously you need to roll it. The way I remembered this word when I was first learning Italian was because of the word in Italian for vegetables, which is this. Verdure. So that's the word for vegetables. Obviously it's got a lot of R's rolling in it. And I remembered the phrase, eat your greens. And then verde, if you got rid of those. Verde is kind of already in there, verde. And that helped me remember the word for green while I was doing it at university. Because colours are one of those things that you don't always use that often, and then suddenly when you need them, you can't think of them, and they're such a basic. And if they're nothing like the word in your own language, so like blue is basically the same as in English, but verde is very different. So it's not one that immediately comes to mind, but if you can think of little stories to remember it by, well, this wasn't a story, it was just a similar word. But if you can have a little tactic like that to help you remember a word, it can be really helpful when learning the language. Also worth mentioning, in Italian, you pronounce more or less every single letter in a sentence. So if it's got an E on the end, you're going to be pronouncing that E. It's not silent like it would be in English. It's not like, in this instance, it's not like it would be pronounced Verde instead or something like that. It's Verde. Just every single letter is pronounced in that word for green. Okay. So moving on, our fifth colour is going to be, I think, the most difficult one in terms of it's a long word, doesn't really have any similarities to the English word, and maybe if you know some French or Spanish that would help to remember this one. I definitely couldn't when I first learned it. It's arancione, and that's the word for orange. Yeah, it's quite simple when you break it down into segments. Arran, rolling the R, cio, just like giallo, it's got that quick sequence, like a consonant followed by two vowels, so it's said very quickly, and it's whenever it's C or an I, it's always a ch sound. So a common word that you'll know that does that exact thing is ciao, which, if you don't know, is the word for both hello and goodbye. It's very informal. You can use it in most situations. Probably the only situation you wouldn't use it in is maybe if you're at a very formal job interview or something, in which case, I'll tell you, you would say salve. Again, pronouncing every letter in that, even with the E at the end, salve. So that's the more formal. Despite it being more formal, it still isn't used that frequently. I think it is something that's a bit of a generational thing in Italy too. So while I was living there, I definitely did hear people using it in casual situations. So if a customer came into a supermarket, for example, it would rarely be younger customers. It would usually be the older generation that would say salve to the shop owner or someone like that. But it's not wrong to use either one in that situation, and to stick to the main principle that says that ciao is informal and salve is more formal. But back to the colour, arancione. Again, pronouncing every single letter. Cio is just like in giallo, where it's ja, cio, and the end is again pronounced. What would be a silent letter in English becomes a pronounced letter in Italian. Also, this word is important because you need to know where to place the emphasis. Emphasis is quite important in Italian in terms of how you communicate yourself. I found myself in a very strange situation where I learned a word and it was written like this. Hopefully you can see this. Yeah, there. So it says, this is just me speaking it in English. Figurati. Figurati. And I found this word because I was trying to find a way to say in a more colloquial way, don't worry about it, don't mention it, because I was using the same phrase over and over again to say no problem, and I didn't know if there was a better way of saying it. And this came up when I was looking for a word, and I had been pronouncing it for the longest time as figurati. I put the emphasis here on the A, figurati. And I said it to one of my flatmates, and he didn't understand what I was saying. And I wrote it down, and he said, figurati. So he laid the emphasis here on the U, figurati, whereas I was pushing it up at the A. And it changed his understanding of what I was trying to say completely. And it just shows how emphasis, similar in English, is so important. And so back to arancione, it's the same. You want to make sure that you're placing the emphasis on the cho section of this word. Arancione. Put a little arrow there to show arancione. Because strangely, it can change the meaning of the word in certain circumstances. Rare, but it does happen. But more frequently, it doesn't change the meaning. It will just change the recipient, whoever you're speaking to, their understanding of what you're saying. They may think you're saying an entirely different word, or that you've just got a strange accent or something like that. But this is one of those words that you kind of just have to practice and practice and practice to get it into your head. So arancione, orange. Okay, sixth and penultimate letter. Letter, colour. It's another cognate, so that means that it's very similar to the English counterpart, looks-wise, how it's written, and also how it sounds. Indaco, which is indigo. There's only two letters different with the English version, and the C in the pronunciation of this is quite a soft C. It's not Indaco or Indaco, maybe how it would be pronounced in English. It's quite soft, it's just Indaco. I think it's what makes it soft as well is because this O at the end, just like giallo, where it has the O, kind of high O sound, it's similar, so I think that kind of raises it up to that level where it's like O, ko. Maybe I'm just talking rubbish. It's not to be confused with the other Italian word. Indica, which could easily be confused actually because there's only three letters difference, but they kind of follow the same sound when you begin to say them. Indi. And this means it indicates. So very different in meaning, but Indaco on its own sounds very similar to the English. It's quite easy to pronounce, so you shouldn't have any problems with that. Indaco is indigo. Okay. So our final letter, I keep saying letter, our final colour is a pretty one. Also a cognate, very similar to the English. Easy to guess, you've probably already got it. Violetto, which is violet. So you can hear in the way that I say it, violetto. This is where the emphasis lies. Violetto, violetto. Yeah, I suppose even if you go up or down on that bit, it doesn't really matter as long as it's distinguishable from the rest of the word, as opposed to saying perhaps violetto, you know, where letto is just the second half. It needs to be violetto. And again, the T is not a harsh T sound, it's verging on a D sound, Violetto. You see how it's very, very gentle on the tongue. To, to, not to. Not pushing much air out. Violetto. So yeah, it's a cognate. It's not too difficult to pronounce. So it's an all-round winner in that sense, in terms of easiness, learning Italian. And there's a little story that comes to mind when I think of this word and how similar it is to the English, and how easy actually it is for Italian beginners to actually kind of guess your way through learning Italian. Because, as I mentioned, we do have the Latin influence in the English language, and I do think that with having lots of Italian already integrated into our language, it's much easier to have access to the possibility of what a word could be in Italian, because you already have some experience of Italian words that are integrated into English. And the story that comes to mind is when I was learning Italian at university, and my lecturer said to our class, "Can anyone guess what the Italian for revolution is?" And we were still all beginners at that time, with very little experience or exposure to the Italian language. And so we all just kind of tried to Italianize the word revolution, and there was different variations that came out. It was like rivoluzione or something like, oh, like ravolissimo, you know, the kind of making it sound Italian. And it turned out the word was rivoluzione, which most of us had got very close to. And so with no prior knowledge of Italian, we'd managed to guess that just from the Italian that exists in the English language, and knowing just a very, very small amount of Italian. So with that being said, Violetto and many other cognates are ones that you could probably actually guess just from having Italian in your language already. Yeah, so that's just quite an interesting fact. And it's something that I learned during my degree that I don't think people always consider when they're learning a language, and definitely not Italian. So, just going to do a quick recap of all of the colours and a few details about each one that I mentioned, such as rolling the R, pronouncing every letter, you know, ways to remember it. I've just got a little list on my computer, that's why I keep turning to look at it, remember the order that I did it in. And if you can manage it, you can pause the screen. Oh, I'm not sure if you can actually, if it's a Facebook Live. But if you can pause it, you can write all of these down if you didn't already, or like I said at the beginning, if you're not writing anything down, that's totally fine as well. So, from the beginning, we had rosso. Remember to roll the R, and the O at the end needs to have a short sound but with your mouth still open at the end, so it's not rosso, it's rosso. As if there was a H at the end actually. Rosso, if you were to write it phonetically. Next one was just blu, blue. Very similar to the English, not very difficult to remember. Next up was giallo, giallo. Remember the ja is said very quickly, like it's one letter, almost ja, as if it's a new letter. And the lo needs to create this kind of shape in your mouth, lo. like you're almost going to spill something out your mouth and you're like, lo. There's no other way to describe it. Yeah, so Verde, rolling the R again, and pronouncing every single letter, so even the E on the end, and keeping the mouth open with that vowel sound, just like giallo, o. When it ends in a vowel sound, it's best to keep your mouth like slightly open at the end. Just helps with the sounding of the letter. And then we had arancione, which was our longest, it was our longest word. And when you break it down, you can say it in one fell swoop. It's fairly easy to do. So that means orange. So we've had red, blue, yellow, green, orange, arancione. Oh yeah, and sure, having that same sound as ja in giallo. Giallo, I should say, with the Italian accent. Second to last was Indaco, with the soft C sound, and with yet another vowel at the end, so you want to be keeping your mouth open, and it's a hard one to describe, but when there's vowels at the end, you almost need to keep space in your mouth. A, O, U. You know, you have to kind of widen your jaw, but keep your mouth open enough, but closed enough. I'm making it sound very complex. You could probably do this quite easily, but I think there is somewhat of a science to it when, you know, if you really want to fine tune your skills. We're only in basics anyway. Indaco. And then, so that's indigo. And then the last one, which hopefully you can see, is Violetto, which means violet. Also a cognate, and quite an easy one for you to pick up. So that was the recap. Now, in the last couple of minutes, I'm just going to show you a couple of phrases that you can take away from the session where you use the colours that you've just learnt in a sentence. A very simple sentence, but it's one that you'll be able to use later on. So I'll just get myself so that you can see the full sentence. I'll also explain just a tiny bit of grammar about the sentence and how it's functioning. Not too intense, just because, like I said, we are just doing basics today. And I don't want to overphase you or put you off learning Italian. Don't do that. So this is the first phrase. You've probably come across all of these words at some point, and you can probably guess what it means as well. Which is another good thing about Italian and being so closely linked to it, is that you know a lot of these words already. So I'll just read it to you. La pizza è rossa. La pizza è rossa, which just means the pizza is red. It could actually mean that the pizza is a rossa pizza. But I think in context is also a big thing that will play into words that have double meanings. If someone was pointing at a pizza that was very, very red, it would likely just mean that. It wouldn't mean that pizza in particular is a rossa pizza. And the reason that we use this before pizza, so this obviously means the, and the reason we use la instead of other words like lo, li, la, le, is because it's feminine. Pizza is a feminine word, so it's la pizza. And it just so happens in this particular sentence that rosa has an A at the end instead of being rosso with an O. And it corresponds to the fact that la pizza is feminine, so it gets a feminine ending, which is an A. But it's not always the case, and it's a bit more complex than that. But just in this particular case, it is. So that's your first phrase. La pizza è rossa. The pizza is red. And then we have il cielo è blu. Il cielo è blu. So this is another article. This is called, just like la pizza, the is called the definite article. It always, excuse me, it always corresponds, when you say the definite article, it always means you're talking about the. Yeah, just making sure you can see the whole thing. And as you can see, it's not la, because the gender of cielo is not feminine. This sentence says the sky is blue, and the gender system in Italian and a lot of other languages that use it have some rules to an extent. There's certain words that are always going to be feminine, or certain words that are always going to be masculine, but then there's some words that don't make sense at all. Like in German, for example, the word Zeit, which means time, is feminine. I don't know why. There's not really any logic to it. I think it's feminine. I may have just told you wrong. But either way, there are words that are feminine and masculine and they don't make any sense. You think, oh yeah, the word mother has got to be feminine, the word father has got to be feminine, but then why does the word time need a gender? And they just do, it's just how it works. And it's exactly the same for cielo, sky, and it's masculine. Il is the definite article that you use for a masculine word that's singular, because we're only talking about one sky, not several skies. So it's il. This is another letter combination where you've got the C and the I, so it's the ch sound. Cielo. Il cielo is blue. Il cielo è blu. Also quite a simple one. I think you'll be able to learn that quite easily. Other than that, grammatically, there's not much to explain. And your last phrase is il libro è arancione. Il libro è arancione. The book is orange. Just as il cielo was il, libro is also masculine. It's always masculine. So it has il as the definite article. It's singular, one book. So that's why we use il. But there is a different form of the that we would use if it was plural, but it's not, so we're going to stay with, we're just focusing on the singular right now. Libro, you can see the roots in English, book, library, that's where that comes from. Is just is always with an accent going upwards at the start and coming downwards, sloping downwards, and then the favourite word, or not, as the case may be, arancione, orange. The book is orange. Okay. So a little bonus question. Can anybody remember the word for rainbow that I said right at the beginning? Remember I said it meant, in English, it broke down to arch and then flash. Flash is probably the part that you'll struggle with. And then put those together and it's the word. Does anyone remember? It was arcobaleno. Arch, flash. That's a perfect flash. And that's an arch. But that actually looks like a rainbow. There you go, 2 in 1. Arcobaleno. Remember to roll the R. Baleno, the emphasis lies on the le, baleno, and that's rainbow. So I think that about finishes the session and everything that I've got to go through. So abbiamo finito, as you say in Italian, that means we're finished. I hope you really enjoyed that. I enjoyed it as well because I've not done my Italian properly since I was at university, so that was really fun to organise it. And I hope you learned something as well from it, some colours, or even if you didn't learn the words or you don't think you'll remember them, sometimes just listening to Italian and hearing how it's pronounced, and you know, the emphasis and the rhythm and the flow is really important. So achieving, being successful in that aspect of Italian, I would say is just as important as knowing the vocabulary and being able to say it, because if you can say arcobaleno, but you say it arcobaleno, it doesn't really resonate with the Italians that much, in a sense that it doesn't really sound like you're speaking Italian to them, because there's none of this involved in it, if that makes sense. So I believe you're still able to access this video after I'm finished. So if you want to go back over it to cement some of the vocab in your mind, to write things down, to just listen to it, you can do so, I believe. I'm sure I'll be corrected if not. And yes, so I just really hope you enjoyed it. So I'm Libby, and I'll see you again soon. Bye now.